Hey guys, welcome to episode number 2 of Working with What You've Got. Yes, I hope you enjoyed the first episode. Please remember to hit that subscribe button before you watch the rest of this video, and also hit the like button. And please let me know your thoughts on what I say in the videos. It's always epic to hear what everybody thinks of what I'm saying. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And yeah, I'm always keen on the discussion, and I like to share and I like to develop how I see things. So when you share, you help me to think about the things I've said and to talk about it. And I hope that I do the same for you. That's what this channel is for. That's why I do what I do, is to share things so that we can expand on what we know and how we think. Because if you never share the things you think about, how do you expand upon it? This is why it's always good to be around people who are able to express what they're thinking and who aren't scared to challenge their own way of thought, because they are the people that you can have conversations with where you can express exactly how you see something, and you can say, hey, maybe I was wrong, or maybe I'm right, and maybe you're wrong. But that only ever happens when you actually talk about something. So yeah, today's episode is called Why Does Life Feel Like a Battle? I wonder if some of y'all can answer that before we actually start this episode, or before I get into what I've written. Why do you think life feels like a battle? And now, I have to warn you before I start this video, just so you know, that it may come across as very pessimistic in some senses. But I just want you to bear with me and listen to what I have to say, because through the pessimism of what I'm going to say, you can find peace in the pessimism, if you want to say that. You can find a sense of joy and a sense of understanding within the pessimism that we call life. Anyway, so I'm just going to start, because I feel like I'm digging myself a hole, which I don't want to have to then crawl out of later. So yeah, life in this material world is a combination of two elements. And these two elements are the material energy and spiritual energy. And they just don't mix. They aren't cohesive at all. And now, it's like oil and water, right? Oil and water doesn't actually mix. When you put it together, you see the oil and you see the water. It doesn't mix. So it's the same with this material world that we live in. We are a soul that resides in the body, and then we are covered by material elements: fire, air, earth, ether, water. Everything in this material world comprises of those elements. But the soul is of a spiritual nature. It doesn't comprise of the same energy that the material world comprises of. So it's like oil and water. Usually what happens when you mix two elements together is that it creates some sort of reaction, right? No matter what you're mixing, they will react with each other in a certain way. So when you mix the material energy and the spiritual energy, the reaction that we get, the reaction that this material world offers us, is the reaction of suffering above and beyond everything else. Yes, there is still happiness here, and there is still beauty, and those things reflect the nature of the divine, but they are just reflections of the nature of the divine. They are not true representations of the nature of the divine. And the reason why is because in this material world, everything is temporary. It is continuously changing. Our bodies change, the seasons change, time moves, we get sick, we get old, and eventually everything runs its course of life, and then eventually dies. So no matter how much beauty someone has, no matter how much fame someone has, no matter how much money someone has, no matter how much strength someone has, at some point all of that starts to change and it starts to fade. So all those things are representations of the divine. They're representations of God. Not representations, more like reflections of God. So that's why we can still see a glimmer of like happiness here. We can have a glimmer of pleasure, but the pleasure at some point comes to an end. No matter what you're doing, you become full of it, and then it's like, this is no longer pleasurable anymore. So you have to take a break, and then you come back, right? And then you experience pleasure again, woo! But then you get full of it again, and you're like, no, I need a break. And then you go away, and then you come back, and then the same thing happens all the time. Ba 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 ba. And yeah, so that never stops happening. That cycle of happiness and sadness and happiness and sadness and happiness and sadness, or emptiness and then fullness and emptiness and fullness, it never stops. It never goes away. So that's the nature of this material world. And yeah, that's why there is suffering, is because the things we're looking for are not here in their full capacity. So we end up placing our nature to want to have an eternal connection into these things, and then they end up changing, and then we're like, oh, but why did that change? Or, oh, I was hoping that this would last for a lot longer. Or, oh, I didn't expect myself to become tired of this, but now I'm tired of this, and then I'm suffering because why am I tired of this? Isn't it supposed to fulfill me? Isn't it supposed to give me some sort of like complete feeling? But it's not supposed to. That's the thing. It's not supposed to. So now, if we think about taking what I said, if we think about the idea of reincarnation, right? Like, raise your hands. I can't really see if you're raising your hands, but just raise your hands if you have heard of the idea of reincarnation, or you at least understand to some extent what reincarnation is. You can actually drop a comment in the comment section below. Yes, put a hand up, or like a here, or say reincarnation in the comment section below. And let me know if, yeah, by doing that, you'll let me know if you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, the idea behind reincarnation is that we live one life, and then when we die, we get another body, basically. We get another life to live. You know, and that sounds really, really great, right? I mean, we die, and then we live, and then we die, and then we live, and woo, you know. So that means like what we do, it doesn't really matter, because we'll just get another chance to do it all over again. And in some sense, that is true. It's like a game. You sort of like respawn. You play your round, and if you die, well then, woo, you try it again. But the only thing is that the nature of that process is that we forget that we've done it before. So it's not like an actual game where you can play and you remember, oh yeah, I remember here, 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 and here. That's how I got to the next level. The nature of life is that reincarnation makes us forget what we did previously. To a large extent, we forget to a large extent that, oh, I did all of this before, and then we do it again without remembering, which is, it's not cool. But that's the way it is. That's the way it works, at least according to Vedic texts. So yeah, so with this idea of reincarnation, we basically get, in our next life, we get what we created for ourselves. So all the good and the bad things that we did in this life, so whether we're busy doing good things or bad things in this life, that shapes our next life. So it's almost like saving money for your retirement. It helps you to live more comfortably when you need it, right? Or if you don't save for your retirement, then you end up struggling at a point in life where you could be living easier. So that's the same concept as reincarnation. Reincarnation is we invest in doing good things in here and now, so that in the next life we can shape a better life for ourselves. As opposed to if we do bad things, then we also shape a future for ourselves in a sense that represents all the bad things we've done. So I'm not saying not saving for your retirement is a bad thing, but it does leave you in a precarious space where now you're old and now you don't have money, or you have to live off such a little bit of money because you didn't prepare or invest in your future enough. So yeah, that's the same concept as reincarnation, which is awesome. Again, that sounds really awesome. So if you think about it like an investment, by doing good things now, then I'm going to reap that reward in the future. And the only thing with that idea, although it sounds really awesome, like I'm going to do so many good things, I'll give back to the community, I will sacrifice, this and that, so that in my next life I can live a rich life. I'll be born into a rich family, or I'll take on I'll get some sort of benefit in some sort, I'll become rich in some way, or I'll have a beautiful body and everybody will be attracted to me, and so on and so forth. And, I'll become really strong because I have good genetics, or I'll have a whole bunch of those things. I'll be good looking, have lots of money, have a lot of knowledge, and so on and so forth. But the only thing with that is that this process, that thought process that I just explained, it doesn't stop the reaction of suffering. So even though you can invest in your future, even though you can invest into making a more comfortable life for yourself in the future, you don't end up stopping any sort of suffering you may experience. You may mitigate suffering to a certain extent, like you won't experience the same suffering as someone who's very poor, who doesn't have money, who doesn't get attention, and who doesn't have the knowledge to change the situation. So you won't experience that level of suffering. But you don't get rid of suffering altogether, because in some point you will get sick, and not just once. You may get sick multiple times, and that sickness could be very severe or not severe. It depends on whatever your karma may be in that sense. And you also don't stop yourself from getting old at some point, And now I'm not saying old age is a curse, but your body does change as you get older. Like, you cannot do the same things that you used to do as when you were young. Like that deadlift that you were so good at as when you were young, like that 300 kg or whatever the case may be. Like, when you're old, at some point, you're not going to be able to do that anymore, and your body's going to change. So you're not going to be as attractive to the people around you as you once were. You're not going to be able to pick up those 25-year-old girls, or, you're not going to be able to, look the same, because you will have changed, and your body will start to get weaker because you are naturally getting older. And that's what old age does to us. And then eventually you have to die again. So no matter what we do to plan for our future, there are certain types of suffering that none of us can escape. Yeah, so then you may ask, well, then what's the point of life then? Am I just destined to suffer despite any of my efforts? Am I just doomed to a cycle of continuous birth, suffering, happiness, suffering, death, and then that's just going on and over and over and over and over and over again? And the answer is, and now before I give you the answer, I want you to give me a drum roll. So wherever you're sitting, just drum roll. The answer is, come on, do it with me. No, thankfully not. The answer is no. We are not destined to suffer unless, and now this is a big unless we continue to choose to do so. I'm going to let that sink in. We aren't destined to suffer unless we continue to choose to do so. You see, just because we are caught in a mixture of two opposing elements, the spiritual energy and the material energy, that aren't cohesive, these elements don't mix, doesn't mean we have to stay here, and it doesn't mean there is no place for us to go where we actually belong. See, our natural state of being is to be in relation to the divine, to be in relation to God. And now, as I was explaining earlier, is that this material world reflects the divine. It reflects God, but it isn't the divine. It isn't God. So we may see some glimmers of the things we want here. We want to be fulfilled. We want to have an eternal connection to something. We want to have an eternal state of peace and pleasure. But the material world doesn't offer that. again, so just as I explained earlier, the material world doesn't offer that because the things here change. Whereas in our relation to, or in our relationship to the divine, in our relationship to God, those things, that never changes, because God is the source of everything. He is the source of beauty. He is the source of fame. He is the source of pleasure, of love, of strength, of wisdom, of knowledge, and anything you can think of, the divine or God is the source of that. And we as souls, that the spiritual side of us, not this material body, the spiritual side of us, we are created to be pleasure seeking. So we are always looking to be in relationship to the eternal aspect of life, to God. But we have forgotten that the pleasure we seek isn't in the reflection, it's in the real thing, which is our relationship with God. You can relate it, or I can give you an analogy of a tree, an apple tree standing by a river. And you see the reflection of the apple tree in the river. And we think that the apple tree, the reflection, is the same as the actual apple tree. But when you try to eat the fruit or gain some sustenance from the reflection, you can't actually do it, because the real thing is not in the reflection. It may reflect the real thing, the reflection may reflect the apple tree, and you may clearly see the beauty of the apple tree, you may clearly see the fruits of the apple tree, but the reflection is and it never will be the same thing as the actual apple tree. So that's like this material world. As we are looking into the reflection, trying to look for what we actually should be getting from the real deal, from the real apple tree. So from the divine or from God. Because it's only when you pick from the actual apple tree can you eat the apple and gain the sustenance and the fulfillment that you really are looking for. Nothing in this world will fulfill you because it's not supposed to. And yeah, so if we placed our sense of happiness or fulfillment in the material world, and we said, okay, here, I'm going to try it out, and I'm going to try and be fulfilled by these things, then our happiness and our fulfillment will always fluctuate up and down, up and down, up and down all the time, because everything here is changing all the time. And so that means our happiness and our fulfillment is going to go like this all the time, blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't happen in our connection with the divine, because our relationship to the divine is eternal. So that means it never changes. It never fluctuates. It's always there. So our sense of fulfillment, our sense of happiness, and our sense of peace will always be in that connection, because it's steady and it's always there. And it's also limitless. So it's eternal and it's limitless. So we never get filled by it to an extent where we're like, I need a break from that. Let me go do something else and then come back. Unless we are that conditioned that we have other worldly desires that are pulling us away from our relationship to the divine. So that's when you would get distracted, or forgetfulness will set in, and then we'll be like, oh yeah, but I'm going to go and try my hand at something else first, and then I'll come back. But if you really put all of that other stuff down, you will see again that stuff isn't giving you the same fulfillment as your relationship to the divine would. So then you would realize in a bigger picture that all that other stuff, I don't actually need to go and do that. I don't actually need to go and chase that, because this right here is giving me the fulfillment that I actually need. And yeah, so again, that's the point of this world. The point of the world is to basically make us realize that we aren't going to find that sense of fulfillment here as we would in our relationship to the divine. And now I could give you an example that you could equate this world to a burning house or a classroom. The whole lesson to learn in this world is that we need to get out of here Otherwise, we will keep facing the same suffering, that same lesson, that same idea that this is not going to actually really fulfill me. We're going to keep experiencing that over and over and over again. Again, no matter how much you invest in your future, no matter how comfortable you make yourself, no matter how many good things you do, you are still going to face that sense of unfulfillment because it's not eternally fulfilling you. And that's a lesson we're learning here in this house that's burning, in this classroom, is that we basically need to get out of here. And yeah, that in my opinion, while I was writing this, that's what real leveling up in life actually looks like. Is that realizing on a deeper level what life is really about, and learning that life lesson that real eternal happiness is not here. So now how this pessimistic, well, if you want to call it pessimistic, how this view can actually help you find a sense of peace is that the suffering that we experience here, viewed with the right state of consciousness, can actually help us to have a stronger relationship to the divine. Because the suffering, the reaction of this material world can remind us that there is a place where we actually belong, that there is a relationship that we can have that is not going to give us the suffering that we're experiencing here. So that's the gold in the dirt, is that no matter that this world is filled with all these things, if we view it with the right consciousness, we can actually use that and use the suffering that we experience, and use the hardships we experience, and use the toughness of life that it just gives us, and we can develop our relationship to the divine through that. And it can basically help us turn around and start to look at God and be like, okay, I get it now. I get it. I'm never going to be happy here, never eternally happy. I'm just going to experience little tastes and glimmer of your happiness, but I'm never going to experience actual happiness until I really, really sincerely want to connect with you. You see, the divine God is doing everything for us, right? So he's created everything. He's put everything in divine order. And that means everything is being provided for us here. Food, shelter, water, anything you can think of. God has made it to provide for us. So his side of the relationship is there. It's just us who are lacking or have forgotten to connect to him. So that's why we are suffering, is that we're living off everything he's done for us, but we aren't connecting to him at the end of the day. But having said all of that, life isn't about falsely giving up anything either. It's not about now that I've realized that none of this is going to give me happiness, that I just push it away and give it up, I'm done with all of it, bam, because there's this idea of you falsely renouncing something before you're actually ready to give it up. Because we all have desires, right? I mean, it's a natural part of being alive, is that it's actually a natural part of the whole construct of everything, because desire is what makes us do things. I desire to make a sandwich because I'm feeling hungry, or I'm hungry so I desire to eat something. And what am I desiring? Oh, I feel like a sandwich. What kind of sandwich do you want? I feel like I want cheese and tomato and whatever you want to put on there, or you even desire a relationship with God when you're so done with the suffering of life that you are just like, what else is there? And then, this idea pops in your mind, maybe there's something more to life. Then it's also desire that helps us to want to connect to God. So that desire for a relationship is what fuels us to actually get up and start asking questions and taking the next step towards him. So yeah, life isn't about giving up our desires. Obviously you have to, think about things, because not all our desires are good for us. There are some desires that are really just going to pull us away from what we should be doing, and that's living our life as a way to connect to God, or living our life in a way that honors our relationship with God, or living our life in a way that is reestablishing our connection with God. So not all our desires are healthy for us. Everybody has a lot of desires. Like, I mean, think how many desires you have for everything, I mean, I know myself, I have tons of desires all the time, every single day, but yeah, anyway, so it's not about giving every single one of them up, because we now understand that none of it's going to give us happiness, none of it's going to give us true happiness. There is a middle path that you can follow. And this is what is said, it's spoken about in a book called the Bhagavad Gita. I should have actually brought it. Anyway, there's a book called the Bhagavad Gita, and in the book, Krishna, God, says that there is a middle path to follow and to walk. There's a middle path that you can take as a soul in this material world with your desires, and you can still come closer to me through engaging what you desire in the service of God. So that means you engage your nature. You engage the things that you wish to accumulate in this life, and you use that in your relationship with God. So an example of what that could look like is a relationship. I mean, this is what my whole my TikTok and my Instagram and my Facebook, and this is all what I'm doing. This is what it's about, is discussing relationship dynamics. Well, bringing people closer to the divine through discussing relationship dynamics, because a relationship is a natural part of this world. Because we're all looking for that person to love. We're all, even animals, even plants, even fish, everybody's looking for, it's built into our material nature, is that we are looking for a sense of love. And it's also the nature of the soul, is to look for love. It's looking for pleasure. So now, understanding that God is the only source of real pleasure, we can sort of shape and mold our relationships in that way to understand that this relationship is going to give me some pleasure. Obviously, it's going to. But the pleasure I'm going to get from it at some point needs to change, because that's the nature of life. So how I can still have my relationship and love the person, or learn to love the person I'm in a relationship with, is to have a relationship with the divine as well, and use my relationship to come closer to the divine. So use it to improve myself and my relationship with the divine, and then also help the other person in the relationship to do the same thing. And then if you have a family, or when you have a family, then you do that for your family as well. You don't just improve your relationship with the divine and forget about your family. You help your family to do the same thing, because we all have a soul. Every single person on this earth has a soul. Every single person that comes into this earth has a soul. Every animal, every plant, everything has a soul. And therefore, everything is actually the spiritual energy enmeshed in the material energy, and everything is experiencing suffering because we're all pleasure seeking in the wrong place. And therefore, when I start to realize that, and I start to then connect to the divine and start to reestablish my relationship with God, then I can help other entities and beings to do the same thing. So again, we're not giving things up. The term that's used in the Vedic texts is falsely renouncing things. We're not falsely renouncing our desires before we're ready to give it up, because that never works, right? Have you ever done that, where you've just thought, I'm going to give this up, but then you find yourself back at it again, like within a month, within a year, within a few days, because you're like, damn, I just didn't realize how much I actually still wanted that, So that's the beauty of this place, in a sense, is that we can still have our desires, but then the whole point is to use it as a way to come closer to God. So you can still be a doctor. You can still be an MMA fighter. You can still, be rich. You can still own a business. You can still do whatever it is that you really want to do. But as long as you gear your material circumstances up and use them in God's service, that's the difference in the end of the day. So the difference between someone who is a normal person, quote unquote, and then someone who's trying to be spiritual is that the normal person doesn't think twice about what they're doing and doesn't use it as a means of service to the divine or to God. Whereas a spiritual person is thinking about that, like, how can I use what I'm doing in God's service? The money that I make, how can I use that in God's service? I mean, you have to use it for yourself too, but like, how can I use some of it for God's service? How can I use my job as a means to help other people and myself come closer to the divine? How can I use my relationship in that way? Yeah, so that's the point of this world. That's the it's like, how do you use the suffering of the world to come closer to the divine? Is that to realize that, it's just helping me to look towards God again at the end of the day. So no matter what suffering is arising, no matter what is coming up, what is it teaching me about my relationship with God? Because when you start asking those types of questions, you're bound to find that you will develop a sense of peace with whatever's happening in the world. Because there's a lot of bad stuff happening in the world. I mean, there's so many bad things in the world. Like, I'm not excusing the badness of the world and saying that, it's just a way to get you to look at God. But ultimately, if you look at it from a bigger picture, the world is going to continue the way it is and the way it's always been, because that's the nature of the world. I don't think there will ever be, and I'm not being pessimistic here, but I'm just being realistic, looking at the way that life has gone and, history, is that I don't think there will ever be an end to things like war. There will always be some sort of fighting somewhere about something, and like you can see in the war, people are ruthless and relentless, I mean, just like take the example of Israel and Gaza at the moment, and any war that's really happened, it's all due to people just thinking they're right and the other person's wrong, and my living and my life is more important than your life, and, all of this stuff. And it's just because everybody's confused. Everybody's confused about what life is really about. And then we've now put up these walls of judgment towards other people and saying that, because you believe something different to me, or because you're, a different skin color or a different shape and size, that now you're different to me. And yeah, that's just, anyway, it's a symbol of the suffering that is a cause of the reaction of the material mixing with the spiritual energies here, which is ultimately the life lesson that we're all inherently learning. So, yeah. So having said that, if we're looking from a spiritual dimension into the material world, and we're trying to use the classroom as a means to actually become wiser, as opposed to get more lost in the illusion of the temporariness of this world, then we will see that we're all actually in the same boat. Every single one of us is suffering. No matter whether you're the guy in Israel or the guy in Gaza, in some sense we're all suffering, because we're all getting sick, we're all getting old, and we're all going to die at some point. No matter if you're a rich guy, or as opposed to a poor guy or a poor person, the rich guy still has to suffer in some way. He still has to die. He still has to get old. He can take as many tablets as he wants to reduce his aging. They can put so much scientific research into how to live longer, but eventually you will have to face that inevitable time of death and die. And same with the poor person. The poor person may just happen sooner because they're without the advancements of science. So yeah, so we're all in the same boat, and we're all looking for that eternal connection to God. But we're all looking in the wrong place at the end of the day. So that's why understanding who you are, understanding your role and your place in the world, that I am just a servant of God in this place, and understanding your role and your place in a relationship, understanding that I am just a servant of God in this relationship, and then I've been given a certain body to do certain things. It's humbling, because and it's a valuable thing, because it really helps us to focus on what's important in life. In my opinion, a lot of the mess that we experience is because we have just forgotten that simple fact that I am a servant of God, you are a servant, that I'm a servant of God, that you are a servant of God, and that we're all in the same boat. We just forgotten that fact. And yeah, I think that's why, again, it's valuable to realize our connection to the divine, and to help other people do the same, because that takes away the battlement of life. Well, no, I can't say that. It doesn't take it away. It just makes it more understandable, because suffering will never go away. No matter, even if you have your relationship with God, when you're here in the material world, you will still experience suffering. But again, coming back to the point, is that you can use that as a way to develop your relationship with God, to reconnect with Him and dive deeper into that relationship, because it will help the battle of life to, I don't want to say just have meaning, because it does more than that, but it will help you to understand why life feels like a battle. So yeah. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say for this podcast. I hope you enjoyed what I was saying. If you didn't, well, let me know. And if you did, well, let me know too. Yeah, let me know what you think in the podcast below. Please remember to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. And yeah, if you want to share this link with people, put it on your status, do that. All the love and the help and the support, it doesn't go unnoticed. So yeah, until the next episode, work with what you got.